and share my screen and welcome everybody once more to today's session. So thematically today, what are we talking about? Well, we're really talking about how we can get data confident to accelerate digital and transformation. And then hopefully, if we've got time at the end of today's 45 minutes, go into an open mic for some thoughts, reflections, experiences, and some questions. I guess the big thing for me is in my world of mentoring and coaching and in supervision of change and transformation practitioners in their own practice. I think one of the things that I've noticed within the human system is that when you're looking at the wider human system, really the go-to is data literacy. And what does it mean to be data literate? And how can we get our organization more data literate? And I think, that, I don't know, that just, it doesn't really capture heart and mind. And there's resistance to that. And also a lack of connection with what does that really mean for me? And if it's not meaningful for me, then I'm a little bit separate from it. And, I don't actually really know how it fits into the bigger picture and all of that kind of stuff. And that kind of stuff is something that you, those of you that have been on previous weeks will know that we've deep dived into each and every one of those areas and looked at techniques for addressing them. But that's why for us, the concept of building data confidence just seems to be a little bit more congruent with the human as opposed to the organizational system, the human system. So that's what we're going to have a look at today. And I think what is really nice here is, and by the way, I always start with a quote, and this quote is anonymous, not because it's come from like centuries ago, because usually you get a nod because it was, some philosopher in, 300 BC. But this is because this is a beautiful, powerful phrase that was shared to me quite recently, actually, and I can't remember who shared it with me, so I would love to attribute them, but I'm afraid I can't. But these data skills are no longer enough. We must support good data practice. So data confidence is really about how are we able to bring consciousness and awareness and confidence of data into the moments of everybody's daily life and not to make it about somebody else. So that's really what today is all about. And in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you a model. And the model is the data mindfulness model. And this model, which helps us to build confidence in the humans within our organizational systems, is a 4-step model. And it talks to connection, it talks to health, it talks to flow, and it also talks to the elephant in the room, as I mentioned earlier, a little bit later on, the idea of ethics. And bringing all of those things together then allows us to really raise the concept of accountability across all 4 areas: connection, health, flow, and ethics, accountability being the 4th bit. So what I wanted to do today, very simply, is just to walk you through, as an info session, to walk you through these 4 elements of data mindfulness. And one of the things that we did right at the very beginning, to start at the beginning, which is connection, thinking about how are we able to get people to reconnect themselves, to build a relationship with data, because that's one thing that we've lost. We've lost the connection we have with data. We don't necessarily have a relationship with data. And it's interesting because when I do data mindfulness as a mini program with customers and teams, I asked people about their relationship with data, and everybody's like, "Oh my goodness, Mel, do you know what? I don't think I've got one." I mean, it's there, it comes and it goes, but I don't know whether I've really got a relationship with it. And that's really key. So one element of connection and relationship with data that we work with teams and in particular leaders with is looking at the hierarchy of their relationship with data. Where does it fit? And you'll probably notice what I've got up on the screen here is an iteration of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And this is something that was created and iterated by Mind Valley and Vishen Lakhiani. And what you can see is there's just the tip of the triangle there has got self-transcendence, sense of meaning, aka purpose. And that's one kind of top on the triangle on the pyramid that has been put there in addition to Maslow's hierarchy of needs that is more regularly known to us all, that kind of ends with self-actualization. And we recognized this as a team, and we looked at this and we thought, blimey, I wonder what it would look like if we overlaid that with the idea of our relationship with data. What would it work? Well, would it work? What would it look like? And that's exactly what we did. So what we've put together is a personal data hierarchy of needs. And we've got some of our customers that work with this as part of their frameworks, and they absolutely love it. And it's kind of simple because you can have conversation with people about, where do you think you are at in terms of your own data hierarchy of needs. Do you understand, and have you got the basic data that you need to do your job? And moving on to sharing, are you actually supporting and nurturing this sense of sharing data with others, and also sharing it out to you, because that really builds your confidence, and it develops your relationship with data, and so on and so on and so on. So a little bit kooky, but actually really interesting conversation to have with people at the beginning of what we call data mindfulness, to see where people are at with their connection around data. So really, really, really key. And then the next thing I want to talk to you about is this kind of separation, that we have between who we are as a human being and data was and has been a part of who we are for eons. If you think about the origin of humanity, and this image that you see here is a really famous and very, very recently discovered image in a cave of 3 wild pigs. They've dated it back to 45,000 years. Now, the key thing here is that's data, and that is our ancestors having a relationship with data to share information with us, to share story with us. So actually, data and humanity have been interrelated forever and a day. It's just the industrial age, it's just the construct of modern business and technology and big data that have actually created a separation. So what we should be doing within transformation is, yes, data literacy and skills are important, but it's important for us to actually think about how we might be able to bring that gap of separation between who I am and my connection with data closer and closer and closer together, because that's what humanity is all about. And I mention this to people all the time. I say, if you want to go and look at a brief history of data, then go and look at the brief history of humans, because what you will see is that is just a data story. So we have always been connected and having a relationship with data. It's just in our modern times that it's been disconnected. So the hierarchy of needs, the data hierarchy of needs, is a really good thing to use with people and to get people to just talk about it. The other thing that we use to help people to connect and build a relationship with data is get people to literally just, what's your data origin story? What is your data origin story? When did you first become aware of the power or importance of data in your life? Was it when you were 3 years old? Was it when you were 23 years old? Was it in, last week because of a new role that you've been given at work? When was it? And what you can see here is not some crazy, images, but actually this is my origin story. My origin story around data was actually quite at a young age. And the telephone is the first thing. I used to answer the phone. I used to say, Hollyhead 3587, Melanie speaking, how can I help you? And I loved saying that. I loved it as a little kid. And my father used to go bonkers. He used to say, you don't even know who's on the other end. You have no idea. You're giving all of your information. Mel, you've got to keep that stuff private. So, my father really taught me and made me conscious of this idea of privacy. My origin story around my data and strangers and sharing it with them, that's part of my origin story. And the other part of my origin story around data is, as you can see on the right hand side with that front door, is this. When I was young, somebody came to the door, and my sister and I were in the door, and the old gentleman was in the door that we didn't know, and we never met him before. And he said, is your mother in? And we said, yes, she is. And he said, oh, I'm your uncle. Can I come in, please? And what we did was we slammed the door in his face. And we ran to my mother, who was in the kitchen back in the days that the kitchen was on the opposite end of the house, in a terrace, a little terrace in a street in Holyhead. and said, "Mum, mum, mum, there's this stranger, there's this man in the front door, and we've slammed the door in his face, and we've been, he's a stranger, so you tell us not to engage with strangers." And she said, "Who is he?" And it transpires that he was an uncle of ours that was a missionary in Africa that my mum hadn't seen in like about 40 years. And the cup of tea that was in her hand kind of melodramatically falls to the floor and smashes because it was her long lost cousin. So, here we go. Those are my two origin stories. And where is your origin story? So, as I say, it might be very, very recent as part of your professional career, but it might be something that is much, much earlier in your life. So it's really, really, really important for us to, first and foremost, just get our people, our leaders, our workforce, our employees to reconnect and to build a relationship with data, first and foremost. What's your origin story? What value does data bring to your work and life? What data is valuable to you, hierarchy of needs. And then we're ready to move to the next level. We're ready to move to the next stage. If any of you are in the world of data, if you're a data scientist or if you're in the data department, you will know that data quality is incredibly important, because the quality of data is part of how we make data safe and secure. And there are many, many frameworks around data quality. But when we're talking to the masses, when we're talking to the employees in the workforce and working on community and culture, data quality can be pretty fearful. It can be a pretty scary thing. So this is a quote, just to let everybody know that if you'd like access to the slides, just let me know. We're more than happy to send the slides as well as the recording out to everybody later on today or tomorrow. And all of the source information for quotes or anything that I'm talking about is always in the notes section of our slides. But this quote is a really important quote. But for me, really, what I want to do is when I'm working with individual as in the workforce, when I'm working with teams in a department or people outside of the purity of technology or data, is I don't want to talk about data quality and scare them to the nth degree. I don't want to do that. What I want to do is I want to bring them on the journey with me. I always want them to lean in. I always want them to be interested and curious. So I talk about the health of data. I talk about healthy data. And that's something that we can relate to because it's quite human. Now, when we look at the quality of data and you go to the House of G, the House of Google, or your preferred Internet Explorer, and you search for data frameworks, you will come up with anything from the simplicity of what you see here to the complexity of what you see here. There are so many data maturity frameworks out there that you can really be goggle-googed by the whole lot. But the key thing for me is this: in more recent times, what has happened is more human elements have started to come into data frameworks or data quality frameworks, which is pretty good. And I think that's really important. And what these boxes in orange hint at and signpost to us all is that the health of data, the human aspect of data, the connection with the human is becoming understood more and becoming more relevant to even the most technical of data scientists. So it's not just about zeros and ones now, it's about open data, it's about human data, it's about the story, it's about, is this believable to a human? How is this going to affect our reputation? How relevant is this? How much value does it give to you as an individual, as a worker, as a leader, as a practitioner of change? So it's really important to see these. So the health element is incredibly important. Now, the other thing about healthy data for me is it allows you to open up a discussion, even with people that might be a little bit kind of black and white in the way that they're thinking about transformation or practice, but it opens up another conversation, which is that data is not just externally coming in as zeros and ones from machines, it's also coming from internally, who we are. And it's not just thoughts. It's not just thoughts or what we know in our head. It's not just intellect and cognition. It is also feelings. It is also emotions that come from our hearts. And we know now that there are hundreds of thousands of neurons in our heart. And equally, we know now more recently that there are hundreds of thousands of neurons in our gut. And what comes out of our gut is intuition. And intuition as a decision-making element of data is very healthy data if we are able to practice it and use it well, because your gut gives you a yes or no answer. It's either a right or a wrong. It's a this way or a that. It's should I do this or not do this? Your gut is a yes or a no. Your heart provides you with emotional data and sensory data in terms of feelings. And of course, your head, which is what we normally just go into when it comes to data, is intellect and cognition. It's the actual thoughts and ideas process. But the internal element of data is really important for us to recognize, where is data that comes from the outside, but there is also data that comes from the inside, and it's not just up here. So again, very much about humanizing data. So what do we do when we're with a group of leaders, or what do we do in practice, to build a conversation around healthy versus unhealthy data when we're with a group of leaders? Well, what we do is this. We talk about two things. We talk about healthy data and healthy habits and behaviors around data. So when data is healthy, what does it look like? When a habit and a behavior around data is healthy, what does it look like? And equally, what we do is then do exactly the same around unhealthy data and unhealthy data habits. And it's that simple. And if we can get people in the room talking and discussing and reflecting for themselves, or maybe what they're observing around them in others, the idea of when data is healthy, it is, when it is unhealthy, it is, when data, habits around data are healthy, when habits around data are unhealthy, what do they look like? This is really, really powerful for us to work with individuals to get them to move from a connection and a relationship to data to understanding data that is around me and also my own behavior around data. And it's much, much easier for us that if somebody recognizes that their habits or their behaviors around data might be a little bit unhealthy, it's much easier to help them and nurture them to develop healthy data habits. Much, much easier than actually saying you have a weakness, you need to develop these data literacy skills, etc., etc., etc. This is human connection. This is part of bringing humanizing transformation elements to the idea of data. So it's really important for us to think about that. And what you want to do is you want to start thinking a little bit beyond that, and just sort of, getting people to understand where their go-to areas are. So what kind of, norms have you got? What rituals have you got? What are the things that you do repeatedly in your daily practice around data? So can you say yes to any one of the following? And that's all you need to do is just, I've put some ideas here, I really want to develop my data skills more, but I haven't got a clue how to do it. I'm scared, so I don't do anything. I'd love to know more about, data, artificial intelligence, etc., etc., etc. This is the stuff that helps people to understand where they might want to go with data. But the key thing is this. I'm just going to go back here for a minute. If you get people to recognize any one of these, or indeed you yourself, you can see something down here on this list of 5 things that I've put up, and you go, yeah, that's me, Mel, but I don't understand it. I'm really motivated by it, but I don't do it. I just don't seem to be able to find time to do it. I really want to develop my data skills, but I just don't do it. I don't know why. Now that is a very, very specific element of human change. That is not resistance to change. What that is immunity to data change. We have an immunity to data. And those of you that have been on previous info sessions with me on a Wednesday morning will know that we have talked about this model in detail. When you recognize that there is an immunity to data, i.e. an immunity to change, the technique that you use to work with that individual, to work with that group of leaders, or that departmental team around releasing that immunity and working through that immunity to data is key. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you is this: healthy data habits do not include immunity to data. And the majority of times that we go in and work with an individual, with a team, what we notice is that there is an awful lot of immunity to data because of everything that's been happening over the last years. Words like big data and data scientist and all of this kind of stuff. I'd love to know more about it, but I just don't, for lots of different reasons. Fear, lack of belief, imposter syndrome, all of these things. But I build an immunity to moving forward. I will never move forward. And just a quick example of what I mean by immunity to change, which is a tangible thing. It's very different to resistance to change, resistance to data change, immunity to data change is this. The immunity to change model was created and introduced back in the 70s by two researchers in America, one of which was Robert Keegan. And there's a beautiful video of Robert on YouTube. And he talks about a very interesting piece of research that he did with Lisa LaHoy, his then research partner. And what they did was this. They worked with some medical practitioners, and they brought together a group of people that had heart conditions. And they knew that based on the medical information, the medical data of these individuals, that if they didn't change their lifestyle, within 12 months, they would most likely have a heart attack and even potentially die. And this was kind of like, 99%. This is what's going to happen if you don't change your habits around it. Now, everybody in the room was, oh my God, I want to, absolutely, I'm going to start exercises. I'm going to change my nutrition. I'm going to just, start thinking about calming my anxiety down. I'm going to, release attention, all of these things. And what the interesting thing is, there is a life-threatening situation. 12 months on, they go back to the people, and only 1 in 7 have made changes in their life. And that's because these individuals, even though they wanted to change and they could see that they needed to, there was something still stopping them. And it's the anchor of belief. It's the anchor of the habits that I have built up over so many years. And if you think about applying data to the habits around data that might be unhealthy, that we have, that have been deep rooted and made stronger and stronger over the years, and equally some of the belief system that we might have around data, oh boy, immunity to data is a big thing that we need to be understanding as modern practitioners and as modern leaders. And that's what immunity is all about. It's when our best intentions fail and we don't even know why. That's immunity to change. I can bet you bottom dollar there's immunity to data, either in your customer environment or within your own organizational environment. So really start to think about how you might be able to observe that. So there's a little bit of a framework that we put together for individuals in order for them to start thinking about healthy data, unhealthy data habits, healthy data habits, unhealthy data. And then when we actually are able to fill out those quadrants, we can then ascertain whether there is anywhere that is particular immunity to change. And if so, that green light's a very specific technique for us to work with that individual or work with that team to release and to remove that immunity to change. Super important, because it doesn't matter what you do in terms of communication and skills and development and coaching and mentoring. If you haven't recognized an immunity to change and it's there, you will not be able to change it because of the example that I've just shared with you. So if we are able to understand healthy data, unhealthy data, our habits around data and people around us being healthy or unhealthy, then what we can do, if that's consciously within our practice and we're a little bit more aware of it, we can start moving to the third element of data mindfulness, building confidence, building data confidence. And it's what we call flow. The flow of data from somewhere to us, through us to somewhere else. And it's a really, really interesting construct, because when we work with individuals and when we work with teams to start to map their data flow maps, to create data flow maps, it's really interesting what comes up. And it's really cool, because what it means is it doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what you do, there's a data flow from somewhere to you to somewhere else. And we want to be able to get people to understand that and to recognize their role when the data comes through them, to be responsible, accountable, and taking ownership of it and respect of it. We call that RAW: responsible, ownership, accountability, respect. So what we do with data flow is we look at people and just think, what access do you have? So what access do you have to data? What technologies do you have the password in that you log in that you can get into it? Or conversations that you have with particular leaders, you have access to that leader and those people over there don't have access to that leader. So it's access to technology data as well as access to human data as well. What data do we create ourselves? Ideation, as well as generating, it might be a report, it might be an Excel spreadsheet, but it might be creating ideas, strategies. What data do we receive which is passed on to us or given to us that we're receiving it, which takes us to the point of what do we pass on, what do we make visible for others to amend, to analyze, and to delete and archive. So it's really important for us to start to understand the pipeline of oil through our own lives, because every single one of us has a pipeline of data flow that comes from somewhere to us and out to somewhere else. And the key thing is this: if we have actually got a relationship with data that we're feeling more okay about it and we're reconnected, if we can start to understand the difference between healthy data and unhealthy data, healthy data habits and unhealthy data habits, when it comes to us mapping our own data flow path, what that means is we can start to take a little bit more responsibility of when the data is coming to us vis-a-vis. We might be able to think more critically about, is that data the right data? Is that healthy data coming to me? Is it complete or incomplete? And is data hemorrhaging, or is data getting stuck in my flow path? Thinking about how I pass on data. Is the data that I'm passing on, a friend has given me a report and asked me to amend it, and I have to then send that report on to my manager. Am I making sure that I am being responsible and accountable for that data going on to my manager? So I'm making it better. I'm making that data that's come to me better. There's a sense of legacy. I'm passing on the data in a better way, in a healthier form than when it came to me. So can you see, I'm talking about data using human words. That means that we can engage with people within our organizational systems and not bring fear to them or anxiety or foster tensions that might already be there around data. Super important for us to think about how we are able to create our flow paths. And then that gives us a sense of where within our flow path we might want to, to take action, to address, to share with our line manager, or to discuss with our teams if we're part of a project, and suddenly recognizing that actually data within your flow path might not be as healthy as it might be, or some behaviors that you're recognizing within yourself or others. So it's super important for us to do that. And by the way, this spreadsheet is a framework spreadsheet that we've got. So if you'd like to understand a little bit more about that, then please do just reach out to me. Let me know when you get your replay of today's session. More than happy to share this with you. So given those three elements, we're in a position now where we should be comfortable around data in our daily life, regardless of who we are and where we work. We might be a bin man on a lorry that we're using mobile phones to capture data or to understand what's happening about where we're going today and what our schedule is looking like. We might be a CEO that is looking at the strategic horizon for the next 5 years, ready to talk to and present to the shareholders. It doesn't matter who we are. But if we have gone through data mindfulness in terms of 1, 2, and 3, we should be at a place that we have got a sense of comfort. And if we've got comfort, we've got a sense of knowing. If we've got a sense of knowing and understanding, we have got everything that we need to push into the fourth area, which is around taking an ethical stance of data, which is being accountable. Now, this is where things get a little bit tricky, because you know what? It's wild, wild west, isn't it? If you think about data around us and coming through us and being generated, oh my giddy aunt, with every swipe, click, conversation, the email that we type, image that we click, video that we share, whatever it is, it's a wild, wild west because there's so much of it. 2.5 quintillion bytes of data that are created every single day. And look what else. All of these specific elements, these data points that I'm sharing with you here are all data points that are within 12 months of being recorded. And the key thing is this: for the first time ever, what you can see is this concept of social media and cloud and working within the cloud platform area is not just dominated by personal life anymore. It is equal to the world of business, because we can see that everything that we're putting here is actually and can be business orientated, which is so incredibly important. I think it's something for me that I point out as well, which always surprises me. There's still 3.5+ million emails sent every minute, even though we've got social media, we've got more informal ways of communicating with each other. We still rely on the communication of email, one-to-one, backwards and forwards. Really, really interesting. But that's probably a subject for another day, right? But the wild, wild west, all of this is going on. So it is completely amorphous when we're trying to understand and take accountability of data and control it and manage it and all these things that our wonderful data scientists and data teams are trying to do, from master data management all the way up to data literacy. And that's what brings me to this point, which is part of the fourth one. There is this elephant in the room, as I mentioned earlier on, without a doubt. And this elephant in the room is, of course, data ethics. And the reason why I say it is an elephant in the room is because of these two elements. Now, McKinsey have just come out with a piece of research, and they've said that from a data perspective, thinking in silo is one of the top 5 risks of modern business, because thinking in silo around data is basically, in their definition, if you look on further on in the research, is that you think it's somebody else's responsibility. Data ethics, I know that's for the legal people when something goes wrong, or it's for compliance, to add controls, or it's the data scientists, right? Surely it's got nothing to do with me. And you're thinking in silos. It's somebody else's role, as opposed to thinking as a network. It's everybody's role. And a lot of the time when you mention data ethics to, just a colleague of yours, somebody in the customer service department, somebody that might be a teller in a retail bank still in the physical high street, you talk about data ethics and they'll go, oh, that's a bit scary, complicated. Surely way too serious for a little minion like me to be thinking about. It's got to be somebody more powerful than me that needs to be thinking about data ethics. Nada. Data ethics, access all areas, everybody's responsibility. And this is what's really, really important. So when we talk about data ethics with individuals, what we do is we tend to try and break it down. We tend to help them to understand it in some simple terms. So when you're talking about data ethics, there are 3 kind of areas that you want to think of. So what you want to think of is you want to think of where the data is going and who's got access to it, to create it, to collate it, and to store it. So who has got access to all of that data to use it? And the reason why I've got a mini here is that there is a great example of that particular element with a colleague of mine. Lee, lives in Amsterdam. Lee's walking down the road one day and he sees a mini driving past on the road. Now, it's Amsterdam, right? You think Amsterdam's all about bicycles. So Lee just looks at the car. It's just something that's caught his eye. He looks at it, doesn't think twice about it, carries on walking. And half an hour later, he's on his computer. And every 5 seconds that he is online on the internet, he is getting adverts, marketing around, do you want to buy a mini? Do you want to buy a mini? Do you want to buy a mini? How did that happen? Well, if you have a look at how many, cameras are on the street, and you're thinking about where that data was created, how and where it was collected, where it was stored, and who is allowed to use it, to the point of who created it, and how did it go all the way down the flow path to a marketing organization that can use it to market to Lee. And I can tell you, Lee is not a miniman. He is absolutely not a miniman. He's owned Porsches and Jaguars and every which way but loose, but certainly not a mini. So the use of data, how people are accessing data to use it for things like that, are really important. The second one is the manipulation of data in decision making. And we've all probably become aware of the Cambridge Analytica in terms of the politics and the American election, which is the biggest story around Cambridge Analytica, is the data that's used for decision making. Do we see all the data? Can I see all the data? Are we only using a tiny bit of data here just so that supports the decision? Are we manipulating the decision based on the data that we are using? That's different. That's the second point. And the third point is really the big philosophical piece, isn't it? It's that, this is the ethics around the decisions we make and the designs we create using data. So this is very, very different, because what this is about is the true ethics around the emerging technology that we're using. And the reason why I've got Tesla there is this. It is very, very interesting to note that when you think about the autonomous cars, that's an ethical dilemma. So number 3 is about ethical, philosophical dilemmas, whereas 1 and 2 are a little bit more tactical, but they're still ethics. They're still around ethical, critical thinking ethically about data. But the third one is really that big philosophical piece. And the philosophical kind of dilemma that we often give to individuals in a room is this. There is a human being behind the wheel of a car, and there is a child in the back seat. There is a human being on the roadside walking with a child. Now, there is an inevitability of a crash. How are we, as the programmers of the autonomous car, what are we going to program? Are we going to program the car to crash so that the likelihood is that people in the car die? Or are we going to, if we are able to, save the people in the car, but it means that as a result, the people on the road are going to crash? Now, giving you that example as an ethical dilemma is relatively simple and easy, because I mentioned one human behind the wheel, one human on the pavement, one child in the car, one child with a human on the pavement. But what is really interesting is this: if you start to change numbers, demographics, and culture in that ethical dilemma, oh boy, do things change. So you might say that it's a white European behind the wheel of the car. There's 3 children in the back seat of the car. There is a 68-year-old man walking on the street. There is a tiny baby that's just been born with that old man. And suddenly, when you put the complexity of numbers, demographic, and cultural background or origin to the ethical dilemma, it changes. And the reason why I'm saying that to you is that there's a really interesting piece of research that shows that the programmers that are making these decisions actually do show human bias based on numbers, based on demographics, and based on culture, their own culture. Very, very interesting, isn't it? So a big subject, but the key thing here is these 3 stories allow us to help people to understand that there are 3 main areas around ethics that we can understand and apply to our daily life. It's not just all about number 3. We can actually think about the ethical side of number 1 and 2 within our daily practice. And there's also something else as well that I don't think people necessarily share enough when it comes to, getting people to lean into being more ethical, being more curious and critical in terms of ethical accountability. It's the fact that we're not alone. We don't have to do this on our own. We don't have to be worried or scared about the data quality frameworks that the people that might be using in the science team. There are other things here to support us. And two of the things that are here to support us, in particular in the UK, and increasingly every government is looking at these, or every country has got an institution that is supporting data ethics. But for us in the UK, we've got two places we can go to. We can go to Open Data Institute, and the Open Data Institute was co-founded with Tim Berners-Lee back in around about 2000, I think, but it might have been a few, I can't remember, so don't quote me on that. But what they did is they put together the Open Data Institute, which is about transparency around data, is about helping people to engage and be more open in their data practices. But what they've got is they've got a data ethics canvas, and it's one page. It's a one-page data ethics canvas, and we use it with leaders. We've introduced it to teams, and we've just got teams sitting at a table and just saying to them, right, okay, so here is a real life example of you guys working with data within your project or within your department, within your area. See if you can fill out the data ethics canvas. What do you think about the data ethics? Any questions come up for you? And it's so powerful. The other thing that we've got as well here in the UK since 2020 is the data ethics framework. And the data ethics framework is not necessarily a one-page canvas, but what it is it's a narrative, and it's got 5 principles to it. And anything that feels a little bit jargon-based, there's a link there, and you can just click on the link and it takes you to a place where it explains what they mean by that phraseology, that new lexicon of business and work. So there's 2 areas, and there are this is just 2 examples, but there are areas, frameworks and support techniques and tools out there that are built for everyone and not for the experts. So can you find the ones that work for you, that are not built for the experts, but are built for everyone, and see whether you might be able to introduce those into your practice and your work, your support of leaders, etc., etc. We say that, but equally there is still a lot of, I guess, greyness, a lot of unknown, a lot of overwhelm when people are thinking about my role with data ethics. So, even something as simple as the data ethics canvas can be a little bit overwhelming for people. So what we do is we basically have a hack. So we've got a data confidence hack, and this is great. We do 5-day, 10-day challenges with people. It's so easy. And what we do is we basically ask everybody every single day to tip your data. And I basically mean tip it. So you go to a restaurant, you've had really good service. What do you do to make that individual, to make the waiter happy, to make the barman happy? You give them a tip, right? You give them a tip because it makes them happy. So all we're asking you to do every day, regardless of who you are, is to just tip your data to make it happy. And if you tip your data, make your data happier, oh my goodness, that is health. That is quality, that is confidence, that is relationship, that's flow, that's everything that we've talked about today. So a really, really cool tip is to tip your data every day. And what do we mean by that? Well, number 1, make sure that your data is transparent. So question, the decision I'm about to make, the data that I've got to make that decision, is it transparent? What do I mean by transparency? It's 2 simple questions. Can the data be accessed by the person that originated it? And this is really important for, personal identifiable information, PII, and privacy and so on. But can the person that created it, the origin story of the data, do I know the origin story of the data? Can that person see it? Yes or no? Okay, does that change anything? I don't know, but it's really important to know it. Is the data visible for review? Oh my gosh, am I the only one that can see this data? Does that mean that whatever I do with this data could, nobody's here to see it? So you want to really get into the practice of peer review, or bringing diversity into the visibility of data. So it's not just you. And you don't want to do that. You want to de-risk it, right? You want to make sure that other people can see it, or can see what you're doing, so that at that point, there might be somebody there and say, oh, hang on a minute, Dan, I'm not too sure whether that, do you really want to do that? So that thinking about that visibility for review, for peer review. So that's transparency. Just 2 little things. There's other things, but for us to tip your data, just think about those 2 things. Intentionality is super, super important. And intentionality is really important because it brings purpose. It really brings purpose into it. Why are we using this data? And is this data for good? Is it for the good of the planet? Is it for the good of the people? Or is it just for profit? And you might want to be okay with that, but ask yourself, be, bringing intentionality is really important in ethics. And do we know the impact that this will have on all the users involved? Because sometimes what we do is we do impact assessments for the end users, and we've forgotten that actually the data has been flowing to different places for them to use it to make it better, like a supplier or a partner, to review it before it goes on to the end user. So do we know the impact that this is having on all of our users? And it's really important for us to understand that. And of course, finally, is privacy. Have we factored in safety and security of this data, especially if it is personal identifiable information? And the final one is, are we compliant with any regulations? Do we even know what regulations or what policies might there be? I mean, that's just the stuff that we want to bring up when we're tipping our data every day. So it's as simple as tip your data every day to make it happy. Alrighty, so if I bring all of this together, what it looks like is it looks like this. So we have got this data mindfulness framework that takes us from potential fear and anxiety to that sense of conscious confidence. And that's really important for us. And across each one of those 4 areas is a sense of accountability. So number 1, connection. We are data, data is us. Where are the origin stories? Can we build the data relationship? Do we know where we're at on the data hierarchy of needs? What can we do about that? Taking ownership and accountability. The health of our data, the data coming to us, our own data, the habits that we have around data, our behavior, and the behavior of data around us. So we get to understand what good looks like for us, because there's no point taking something from somewhere else. It's better for us to understand what good looks like for us and to get better and better and better from there. And the third one is flow, and recognizing that data flows through and from and to a human as much as it flows to and from and toward a machine. So it's really important for us to get that sense of flow and to understand that there is, for every data point, there is an origin story. And for every piece of data that comes through us, there is a responsibility we have of the legacy of that data as it passes through us. That's humanizing data. It's a really powerful thing. And finally, ethics, in terms of supporting your role and the data within your role and your job within that. It's so incredibly important, and recognizing that there are support mechanisms there. So that is data confidence. That is really what we're talking about when we're talking about data mindfulness. And of course, I mentioned at the start that is part of a wider and bigger framework, approach and practice, which is what we call the Dillon Way. And the Dillon Way is the framework, approach and practice that we use to humanize transformation that you can see here, which is part of tenets, profiles, that we use for profiling, mindsets, the spinal cord, 10 practice indicators, principles, and over 150 practice indicators that can help us with tiny little shifts in our day. And if you would like to know more about that, then please do let me know in terms of for yourself, for the project or program that you're working on, or maybe you're working with a group of leaders at the moment and you'd really like to think about how that might work for you guys. And as always, and I say this every Wednesday, I do try and keep my Thursday afternoons free for people that might want to understand a little bit more about this for themselves. So as well as understanding the framework and maybe from a commercial perspective, what about you yourself? So what I do is I provide pro bono strategic sessions, just mentoring and coaching in the background, just to help to really fatten out and to widen out the consciousness around everybody's ability to humanize transformation, and thinking about your now, thinking about your future, and thinking about how you might be able to map towards where you want to be. Because humanizing transformation is about modern leadership and role modeling. Are you the modern leader? Are you the role model? If you want to be, if you feel you're not, if you feel you want to understand how you might actually get there a little bit faster perhaps, then please do come and join me on one of those sessions. And they're one-to-one and they're 100% confidential. There we go, folks. That's data mindfulness, the connection and relationship I have with data, the health that I am able to start understanding and being a little bit more aware of healthy and unhealthy data, the flow of data from origin story through me to the legacy of betterment, and accountability and ethics across all 4. And that gives us a really, really strong conversation that we can have with anyone in the organization, in any role, at any level. which is really, really important for us to build this confidence around data, and not just the skill of data and data literacy. So let me start to bring today towards an end, because I know we've only got a few minutes left, and I will bring us out into the open for a couple of minutes before I finish today's session, is just sharing with you these data confidence affirmations. And it's kind of like affirmations now, we're talking about data, but you know what, this is great. And I give everybody the challenge, and I give you the challenge today of getting these affirmations visible on your computer, on the mirror in your bathroom, who knows, by the kettle in the kitchen. But just thinking about popping these affirmations onto a little post-it note or something else, or maybe in your journal every morning, and just say them to yourself. I always seek to see the human connection in my data, story and intention. I always view the health of data and the health of behaviour towards it. I always try to see the flow of data from its origin source to leaving me either the same or better than it was before. And every day I tip my data decisions and my actions around data to make data happier. And that will really increase the whole kind of sense, the community, the sense of data within your system. Banana skins, always banana skins. And the first banana skin for me is don't ignore it anymore, because this is really part of us. Data is us and we are data. So important for us to really start building our relationship with data. And equally, thinking that when it gets too hard, when it gets complicated, when we're fearful or a little bit anxious about it, we tend to then say, oh, somebody else's responsibility. Nada. Ethics and accountability is everybody's responsibility. And if we work on the model of data mindfulness, people are more likely to be okay by that and naturally start to build their own practice habits around being more responsible for data themselves. So there we go. So thank you everybody for listening to today's info session all about data. Arguably a little bit of an icky subject because it's sometimes so incredibly technical, scientific and complicated. It doesn't have to be when we're trying to bring our systems or our leaders, our human systems or our leaders on the journey with us. So a couple of thoughts there to end today's session. What I will say is we've got a few minutes left. I am more than happy to just answer any questions or some thoughts or reflections that anybody might have. But what I want to do just first and foremost is to thank everybody for staying with me today and allowing me to talk to you about the model and the concept of data mindfulness as opposed to data literacy as something that we should and could be introducing in our transformation and in our human and leadership systems. So thank you everybody for coming on today's session, and I'll be back again next Wednesday at 9 a.m. talking about another element of how we can humanize transformation to accelerate success. If you'd want to know more, just reply to the email that we will send each and every one of you with the replay of today's session. Either today, sometimes we're a little bit late, we do it the next day, but it's in there. And so I just want to let everybody know that we're here for you, and it'll be really interesting actually today to see whether you are a little bit more data mindful as you're going about your practice and your decisions. So thanks everybody for joining today, and thanks for the little messages in the chat. That's brilliant. Take care everybody, and I'll be back in touch with you on email with the replay, and just let me know if you need slides. Take care, have a great day, have a lovely evening, and I shall see everybody soon. So have a good one. Thanks everybody, bye bye.